Oh.
I can tell you all of the things that I'm feeling right now. If you want, I'll hand you the keys to my mind. My thoughts are swirling round and round in my head. I don't know how to stop them and put on to bed. I can tell you all of the things that I'm thinking now. How it all is changing so fast and I can't turn back the time. Oh, the sweet time when you were here and it wasn't far, just close and near. Oh, therapy, you're my remedy. Let me break what I ache into pieces. Oh, therapy, you're my fall back on my feet or my knees. I am trying to breathe. Tell me all the ways that I can do better. My mind is a racing car, I know it'll crash. My heart is a sinking ship waiting to splash. Therapy, you're my remedy. Let me break what I
Hello, Ross.
And welcome. Charlie, how are we doing?
Long time no see.
You too, sir. We had a week off for Father's Day, but we're back here with episode 5 of Talking Rugby Occasionally. How was your Father's Day, Charlie? You have 2 sons that both play rugby. I have 1 son, and he is definitely unlikely to play rugby. He's not an athlete, but he's smart, thankfully.
You never know.
How was your Father's Day?
It was great. It was great.
Glad to hear. I told you I was going to shave for this episode. Unfortunately, I shaved the wrong side of my head. I shaved the top part of my head instead of the bottom part of my head. But
you had slightly a little bit more hair last time I saw you.
I did not a whole lot more, but everybody seems to approve of it so far. So I will appreciate my position on Team Bald officially for now. But we're glad to have you back here for, as I said, for episode 5 of Talking Florida Rugby Occasionally. We'll talk about our guests coming up this evening. But first of all, most importantly, let's get to our sponsors for this evening. Charlie, let's get to our first sponsor who has graciously decided to sponsor so far every episode of Talk TFRO, as we should call it.
And that would be Chris Ream. And Chris has been actually like one of the first and most dependable sponsors I have had since I started the websites and with the videos. I mean, he's always been very supportive, and now this is his second episode he's sponsoring. Maybe, hopefully, we'll have him for a long time, and hopefully not only him.
Yes, Chris is obviously a referee in the Florida Rugby Referees Association, a great referee, and has been a sponsor now for us. I think it's our second episode, and has agreed to sponsor all episodes of TFRO. So if you're interested in finding out more about life insurance, please give Chris a call. You can visit lifeinsuranceguy.com. Obviously, and also if you have an existing life insurance policy, Chris would be happy to review that policy. But if you don't know anything about life insurance, Chris will be happy to help you out. So lifeinsuranceguy.com. Chris Ream, one of our great sponsors. See his website and his information. All his contact info is on there, his address and phone number as well. But we also have a sponsor for tonight's episode featuring Okapi Wanderers and Key Biscayne. K12 Stars. K12 Stars is a fundraising mechanism for youth sports organizations. Now, Charlie, I spoke to you a little before our episode this evening. We talked about how as young kids, we collected Panini soccer stickers. Now, you did show me earlier. I don't know if you still have it there. You do. Is your sticker album from Los Terros, the Uruguayan rugby team from the 2019 World Cup, obviously in South America and Europe, collecting stickers of your team, something you just do as a sort of rite of passage as a youth. Now, K12 Stars allows youth sports organizations, any of them you out there, to create your own sticker album at no cost and no risk. Now, you might ask, well, how does that work? So K12 Stars helps you kids come and complete the album through buying and exchanging stickers between themselves, increasing their sense of belonging, commitment, and recognition within a family and fun gaming environment. And Charlie, you collected some stickers there in that album. How many stickers do you have in that album, Charlie?
No, I just got 8 because it was really hard to
8 stickers.
Well, I couldn't go to Uruguay, every weekend to get the stickers.
I think I've been a Panini collector, especially of the World Cup albums over the last few years. But K12 Stars produced, I know for the Okapi Wanderers rugby program, produced a sticker album for them and some other clubs in Weston, such as Midtown and Futsock. And during 2020, K12 Stars will continue to deliver sticker albums. It's planning to launch a digital sticker album platform by October of this year. So to learn more about our sponsors this evening, K12 Stars, please visit k12stars.com. That's K12, the numbers 12 stars.com, or follow them on Instagram at K12 Stars, K12 Stars. A big thank you to Thomas Echeverria for sponsoring tonight's episode of TFRO. Again, we had a week off last week. As you can see there in some of the photos that Charlie is posting there, just how cool these stickers really are.
Let me say quickly, as an added bonus, when you do this, you get all your players taken pictures of and all the teams for free, because
awesome.
So that is an added value to this. I mean, clubs that have youth, they should really look into this. And
as a youth growing up in Europe, I think my dream was to be on a Panini sticker. I think in the USA it would be being on a baseball card, but this is as close as you can come to that, I think. So check out K12stars.com or follow them on Instagram at K12stars.com. Now, before we get to our guests this evening, we're going to have a quick chat. We're going to start a little thing called 3 Quick Things, which we get to before we get to our guests on the TFRO podcast, which now is available on iTunes and all major podcast platforms such as Spotify. So reach out and search for Talking Florida Rugby Occasionally. You can, if you can't join us live on YouTube, or Facebook. You can follow us on podcast. So listen to us in your car, on the way to work, on the way back from work, or even if you're that bored during work, and check us out just on the audio platform. So yeah, we're on iTunes now and Spotify. Just search for Talking Florida Rugby. So 3 quick things, Charlie. Barefoot Sevens, which normally, traditionally held, I should say, at the end of July or in early August, has tentatively set their date for now November 7th. Do you think rugby in general will be back up going by then?
Well, because of the current events of the past week, it really seems sort of unlikely, but who knows? Hopefully we will have it. It's really up in the air, and I don't know.
No, I think everybody's dying to play rugby. Watching that intro with all the youth players playing almost brought a tear to my eye of how much we miss rugby. And hopefully things will get going by November. Listen, things have been bad, yes, especially down here in South Florida the last few weeks, but hopefully things will start declining again over the next few weeks, and it is a good 5 months away. So hopefully by November we'll be able to play some rugby. If not, October, Surf and Sevens, which is the tournament that I host normally in West Palm Beach, was supposed to be June 6th, but obviously that didn't happen. We're hoping to have something going in October, perhaps in association with FCC Sevens, but a lot of dates still to sort out in that month of October. I know the Florida Rugby Union's thinking about perhaps having an AGM and a get-together in September, so we'll have to see how things settle. But we'd love to be playing rugby by October. There's no doubt about it. So that's our first quick thing to talk about. Great news that Barefoot has selected a date. Let's go to our second thing here. USA Rugby has decided to move to Glendale, and I'm not going to say empty Infinity Stadium, but the Colorado/Glendale Raptors of MLR have obviously departed the professional scene and have left a gaping hole in the rugby scene in Glendale, Colorado. And USA Rugby has sort of jumped on that opportunity and decided to move their headquarters and their training to Glendale, which seems like a good opportunity in the first place. But the problem is the Glendale Raptors just recently dropped their women's and youth programs, leaving just the men's senior team, which has obviously led a lot of ladies very upset and the youth upset that they've got rid of everything else but the men's senior team. So, Charlie, what are your thoughts on this? USA Rugby sort of jumping in at an opportunity to perhaps save some money, but obviously at the expense of the women and the youth.
Yeah, well, this USA Rugby thing is all to be seen. What's going to happen, right? And I'm not sure of this move. We'll see.
I mean, obviously it makes sense financially, but we've seen USA Rugby not particularly savvy with the financial side of things over the last few years. So hopefully lets them save some money, but but to see it happen at the expense of the women and the youth is a little disappointing.
Yeah, it is a great place to be, no doubt.
I've yet to go to Infinity Park. I hope to be there at some point.
Oh, it's awesome.
In the near future. I know you've been there with the Sevens side of things and FIU to watch your boys play there. Now our third of our 3 quick things to talk about this evening. We've got some Florida-related news over the last couple of weeks, actually over the last month or so, that we kind of missed on the podcast. And I want to encourage all Florida, especially the youth representatives and the high school representatives, to reach out to us about potential signings, especially outside the state. But the first person I want to give a credit to is, well, actually a shout out to, is Sandra Lascano of Boynton Rugby, who got a full scholarship to play rugby at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut, and also Kaylee Massa of Wellington Wizards. She signed to play at Queen's University of Charlotte, which is where, on the boys' side of things, Wizards boy Joshua Schwartz is also going next season. And I also wanted to give a quick shout out to one of our big fans out there, Bert Wantlin, who's the father of Nicole and Alex Wantlin, 2 other Wellington products that have gone on to great things and perhaps even more after their college career. Bert emailed me recently and updated about their situation. Nicole was playing rugby at Army. He's doing very well academically there, as well as off the field. On the field, as I said, she was named to the NYRA All-Academic First Team, and then the on the field first team, as well as wing forward this past 15 season that was obviously cut short by COVID-19. And her younger sister, Alex, another Florida product, will be heading to, I've never heard of this place, Life University? Never heard of it, Charlie. Have you? I don't know.
That's a weird name. That's a weird name.
One of the biggest collegiate programs in the country. She's going to head there in the fall, hopefully, once everything gets cleared up COVID-wise. She's also spending some time at ARPTC, the American Rugby Pro Training Center in Arkansas, where one of our referees, Haley Slaughter, is now sort of the referee in residence there for the time being. And Alex is also in line for some U18 representative duties once rugby gets back going again, hopefully this fall. So definitely some bright young stars from the Sunshine State to keep an eye on there. And again, if you have some Florida-related news, especially out of state, to mention to us for the top of each show, please let us know by tagging us or messaging myself or Charlie on Facebook, or Rugby in Florida on Facebook, or Charlie, that's CHARLEE, not IE, EE at rugbyfl.com, or myself at Ross Davenport at gmail.com. We'd love to give some shout outs to those Florida rugby products that are doing well outside of the state. Excuse me. All right. Now that our 3 quick things are out the way, let's get to our main subjects of this evening, which we're going to focus on the clubs now. We talked to some referees, we talked to some players. And now perhaps let's talk to some of those players, some of those people behind the scenes at the clubs in Florida, or perhaps formally we'll talk to one of those as well. I think if we start off focusing on the youth side of things, and Okapi Wanderers being one of the biggest clubs in the South, if not the entire country, we're going to focus on them. And then obviously Key Biscayne, I think, Charlie, if I'm correct, is the oldest youth rugby team in Florida. If I remember correctly.
That I think is correct. It was almost at the same time when Miami Rugby Youth started, but I think they started a little earlier.
Obviously, they're still in existence. Rest in peace to Miami Youth. Hopefully, they get things going back again down the road here. But from Okapi Wanderers, we have Gavin McLeavy, who is still in Florida. And then we have Matthew Hayden, who I'm going to start a rumor now that he got kicked out the country and is now residing back in his home country of England. It is 12:44 a.m. in England, so I really appreciate Matt joining us. Gentlemen, how are we doing this evening, or this morning, I should say?
All good. Excellent. Thanks for inviting us on, boys. Like it.
Of course, Matthew, how are we doing?
Really, really good over here. Enjoying some proper food, and they're taking the handcuffs off finally. So just got the ankle bracelet to worry about.
Yeah, any of you that are involved in youth or high school rugby in Florida will know these two faces. And then from Key Biscayne, we have Marcelo Dico de Cunha. Marcelo, how are we doing this evening? Live from Key Biscayne or Miami? I'm not sure which it is, but
hi, Rose. Hi, Charlie. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good to see you. Live from downtown Key Biscayne. Is there a downtown Key Biscayne, Dico?
Well, Key Biscayne is not the big, so yes, it is downtown, I can say.
Exactly. So listen, hopefully we can learn some things from these gentlemen this evening. Obviously, again, as I mentioned, Okapi being one of the largest clubs in the South, if not the USA, and Key Biscayne, one of the first clubs in Florida, and still existing and thriving at all levels. So let's start with Gavin McLeavy. Gavin, let's give us a quick bio just of you rugby-wise and how you ended up in the US and what you're doing these days. Obviously, still involved with Okapi on the ground here in South Florida.
So obviously I played a bit of rugby league back in the day. I know that's probably a big scandal for you lot. You know, nobody in Union likes the rugby league guys. But yeah, I played rugby league playing up, and then sort of started traveling around because it turned out I wasn't very good. So played a little bit in Spain as well, and then landed over here about 12 years ago now, I think it was. And then myself and Matt and a few other folks started Okapi Wanderers for our kids, obviously, as most dads do. And my boys are like 13 and 15 now, so they're obviously enjoying their rugby. They've been playing 5 or 6 years. So came over about 12 years ago and been loving it ever since in South Florida, having a good time and trying my best not to get a real job and just doing as much rugby stuff as possible, basically.
Yeah, those of you in Florida that might not be familiar with rugby league, it's sort of it's in England especially, obviously massive in Australia. I mean, England is played mostly in the northern side of the country with 13 people and a lot more violence than rugby union, a little less flow. But those of you that have played the game, I played one game of rugby league. I would never play it again, ever. I promised myself at that point that I would never play that sport again in my life. It's only for the tough guys. And then
it's a little bit faster. That's about it. But it's good. It's fun.
It's a similar sport, but it's also very different in other regards. And we have live from where exactly in England are you, Matthew?
I'm in Ramsgate, Kent.
Ramsgate, Kent, and representative of Thanet Wanderers Rugby Club. So, Matt, give us a little bit of your history regarding rugby and how you ended up in Florida.
Well, yeah, started rugby. Obviously, as you pointed out, and Gavin said, Gavin's from the north, I'm from the south, so I played proper rugby union.
Yes.
Started at my old boys' grammar school at 11, and the game genuinely changed my life. I was always a fat kid, was never an athlete. They put this funny oval ball into my hands, and suddenly every liability I had became an asset, and rugby became my thing. Played for my club, local club here, Thanet Wanderers. Played for my university, played away, and then decided to see if rugby was just starting to turn professional. I wanted to see if I could maybe be good enough to make a career out of it. Went to Australia, like Gavin, went to Australia, and basically was told, well, you probably could, but you have to work harder. And to be really honest, I didn't want to work much harder. So just went for social rugby, tripped all around the world, ended up playing for a few clubs in Australia, ended up in the States 20 years ago in LA, played for a couple of years there. Then found my way over to Florida and bounced around some of the Florida clubs. I played a few games for Boca. I played a few games for Miami.
Don't tell anybody that.
Well, and then wanted to find a place for my son to be able to play rugby because he was showing a bit of an interest.
Yes.
And pretty much that was it. We started the club, like Evan said, we started as a place for our kids to play.
And now let's go to Marcelo real quick. Marcelo, speaking of around the world, obviously you came to South Florida from Argentina, one of the biggest rugby playing countries in the world, number one in South America, without a doubt. So talk about how you ended up here and your rugby background, Marcelo.
Yes, I moved to Florida in 2009. I played rugby when I was 10 years old until I was 26, more or less. Then I took my kids to the club to play. Then we moved to Florida in 2009. And I found this wonderful group of people of Biscayne Rugby Rats. The first 2 years, I just took my kids to the club. Didn't do much for the club. Then I started assisting some coaches, helping with things. And then moved to helping with the organization, relationship with the union, the village of Biscayne, other institutions, all the backside of the club. That is important as well, and it takes each time more job. So, but I always been passionate about rugby, and most of my friends come from rugby. So, I mean, it's part of your story.
It is sort of part of your DNA, right? Especially in Argentina. Now, I remember I was talking to Charlie before we came live tonight about Key Biscayne youth rugby. It was one of those things that before anybody had a youth rugby team, it was like, oh, I'm hearing rumors that there's some people sort of semi-organized down in Key Biscayne that were throwing a rugby ball around before anybody else was. And then now, you've been around for, as you said, 11 plus years now, and awesome to see. Let's go back to Matt and Gavin. Now, how did you guys meet and get Okapi rugby going? That's obviously the biggest thing that some people talk about is how do I get a rugby club going? How did you end up doing things in Weston?
I can't remember now. It's been so long. We both started. We must have crossed paths when there was West Pines. So because we started.
No. When it was Weston.
Before it was before West Pines. That's true. Yeah, that's right.
We started West Pines, right?
That's right. So we met at Weston. When Weston existed and sort of was helping out Javier. Then we went to West Pines and made that club. Javier wanted to do that on his own, so then we went and made Okapi together. That's true. Yes, there was myself, you, and the Gallows. And we ended up in Weston. That rugby club that was originally there had kind of dwindled out with like Lucas Bestrocci and all those guys. That now they're out of university and long gone now. And everything after that sort of didn't continue. So yeah, that's true. And after that, we wandered into Weston and rattled some cages and knocked on some politicians' doors and did what we needed to do, I guess.
And Charlie and I talked about this before the episode. Talk about your relationship with the city of Weston. It seems to be a very positive one, although I know a lot of the games these days are played on turf, which might not please some players. But talk about the importance of having a great relationship with the city that you play in.
Matt, you want to take that?
Yeah. we worked incredibly hard to foster a relationship with the city, simply because in order to do something, in order for it to be a real rugby club, you've got to kind of go back to the beginning. We call it Okapi Wanderers because, in the spirit of lots of football and rugby teams, clubs that can't find fields end up being called nomads or wanderers or whatever. So in that first year, the city of Weston was really, really accommodating to us, even though they didn't really have a reason to, and they found fields for us to play on. They weren't always the best fields, but they found a space for us to play. And so moving forward with that, we've always felt like we wanted to repay the faith that the city has had in us by making sure that we can put out a really good team. We can form a really good club that's going to last for a long time, and is going to continually make the city look good. And you mentioned, wow, that's a good pass. You mentioned the turf field that we had. To the degree that the city of Weston spent an extra couple $100,000, they were going to turf the fields anyway. But for us, in only our second year of existence, they spent extra money they didn't need to make sure that the fields were World Rugby compliant, which was a really, really big deal. I mean, that's a huge deal. So the good relationship with the city has been absolutely vital for us.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously, turfing fields seems to be a popular thing for these cities to do to save money with the upkeep. But yeah, as long as one of the biggest things, as you mentioned, Matt, is the size of the field, making sure that the fields are big enough to accommodate rugby. Marcelo, I know you weren't there at the beginning of Key Biscayne, but talk about how you got involved and in your knowledge of the history of the club, of the Rats, we should say.
Yeah. The club started in around 2007. Pablo Kremaski came from a trip to Argentina, and he thought about teaching their kids for someday if they go back to Argentina. And then his brother Juan, Marcos Corti, Gonzalo Cortabarria, and other guys joined him, and there it was started. When I arrived in 2009, there were already like 30 players, no more than that. And we kept growing, and now we have like 170, 180 players. But the thing is probably that, I remember that we played with Weston at the beginning. It was one of the few clubs to play with. Toral was another one. West Pine, then came Miami Rugby, who was very successful in men's rugby. I mean, started with the youth rugby as well. So it was very difficult at the beginning to find some other clubs to play with. And so we did what we can in Key Biscayne, growing. And the thing is, we taught our kids who were like 6 to 8 to 10 years old at that time.
Right.
And so we probably grew different from other clubs in Florida, where they grew from high school down. We grew from under 6 or under 5 and up. So that was kind of our story.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that Key Biscayne, everybody's sort of waiting for Key Biscayne to be that big explosion, because these kids have had a rugby ball, in their hands from the youngest age, just because their parents obviously grew up playing the game, the Argentinian influence down there. As you mentioned, one of the obstacles being having teams to play at the beginning. What are some of the obstacles, Gavin and Matt, that you guys came across in creating Okapi, other than obviously having other teams to play? Charlie and I talked about before the show about maybe having Weston as a focus, as a smaller town. The same with Key Biscayne, rather than Miami as such. Miami, a town where it can take you a half hour to get from one side to the other. But talk about some of the obstacles that you guys came across and how you got across them.
I mean, rather than not specifically about our problems, but what I see, for example, Miami, they always have traditionally had the problem where the city will put them in a different part of Miami every year.
Yeah.
So with the benefit, I guess we probably have is Weston's small. Like there's one park or the other, and that's it. There's nothing else there's not much else you can do. Similar with maybe with Key Biscayne, you've got one little park or the park around the corner that's literally 100 yards around the corner, and you're golden. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why it worked. Maybe similarly why places like Glendale or random towns that become very good with rugby and they manage to grow the sport is because maybe they've got like a sort of central focus rather than being so spread out. That's one theory, I guess. The obstacles, one of the obstacles is it tends to be the high school American, for me, the big gripe is the high school American football coaches. They seem to put the blocks on people all the time. I've had it. Matt will remember a few, like, well, we won't mention names, but those kids that they were playing American football. They were happy playing American football, but they would like to play rugby occasionally. And they would receive a message or a conversation with their coaches saying, I heard you playing rugby. If you keep playing rugby, I'm dropping you. For me, ridiculous. You know, that for me is one of the massive issues. And I mean, one way to get over that is make a youth team at under 12, under 14, so that when a kid gets to high school, doesn't even care about American football because he's obsessed with rugby.
Right.
That's my way. I mean, and because that's usually what happens with anyone. We've all had that experience, right? I played soccer. My granddad was a soccer player. And then a minute I started playing rugby and someone said, I can hit that guy as hard as I want with my shoulder. Then I was like, sweet, don't have to play soccer anymore. You know, we've all had a varying experience of that, right? So kids get obsessed with rugby once they start playing it. So if we just get them obsessed younger, then we don't have to worry about the American football coaches. So my mentality, and I think Matt probably agrees with me, having those 8, 10, definitely in Key Biscayne, they're doing it, those 8, 10-year-olds, the under 12s, playing the game. And we've got a crop of kids now that are leaving the under 15s or 16s, whatever it is, going into the high school age group or the under 19s age group or whatever it's going to be this year. They're obsessed with the game. They've been playing the game for 5 years and they're 15, 16 years old. There's no way you're going to take a rugby ball out of their hand at this point.
No.
They'll play in football, but now American football for them is secondary. That's a beautiful thing to see. That makes me happy.
For sure. Now, was it something you guys, did you ever end up reaching out to the football coaches in the local area? And obviously Western being in Cypress Bay, you know, a massive high school, you know, one of the biggest high schools in the country out there, not particularly great at football, but did you ever reach out to the high school coaches, the football coaches, and say, look, you know, look at what Pete Carroll's doing in Seattle, learning the tackling from rugby players? Or was it one of those things that was just, you kind of left it down to the players themselves?
Yeah, we've reached out pretty much every year, I think, haven't we? At one point, obviously, there's a rotation of coaches, but yeah, I know I have. I'm pretty sure Matt has. We might have made a little bit of inroad with a few coaches because they're what's the name of the gent that's a friend of yours that
Brian,
he had his
Brian McCarthy, yeah.
Right. So Brian McCarthy his kid was playing American football, and he's an American football coach. And he got his kids playing rugby. Now he's gotten a position as an American football coach in a prominent school. I'm presuming it's probably Western High, is it? He's
actually head coach at West Broward.
West
Broward, yeah.
So now there's a different conversation. Now we've got a rugby guy, a guy that likes rugby. He's an American football guy, but he likes rugby, and now he's getting a strong position as an American football coach. So now the dynamic might begin to change a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously, especially with the amount of schools now offering scholarships for rugby. I mentioned a couple, obviously, in the pre-show, Queen's University and Life University, and the opportunities almost for rugby are. If you're not an elite football player, the opportunities are there for rugby. Matt, I mean, have you tried to obviously let those players know that this could be the route to you getting a free scholarship?
Yeah, we've been since we started. We've been very, very, very clear. You know, it's a minute percentage of these athletes who are going to get picked up by college and go professional in football.
Yeah, especially just a full ride. Yeah,
right. Whereas rugby is casting a much wider net at the moment, and you know, and there is the money coming into the college game to provide some really good education for some of these kids, to give them a really, really good college experience. So that's one thing over the last couple of years we've been really, really clear, and I certainly have. I mean, Gavin's actually made a career of it. And one of the things I've been really clear with parents is, you know, there are good opportunities, schools like Queen, schools like Life, and the standard, you know, arguably the standard of Life games is right up there almost with the MLR. So with lots of opportunities, we're really, really clear. I do want to say one thing to the last question asked was, you know, what the obstacles we overcame, because I've got to give Marcelo and Key Biscayne a bit of a nod. When we were first starting Okapi, one of the biggest things that happened to us was we went down to Key Biscayne for our very first game on a Sunday. And we went down on a Sunday morning. We didn't have kit yet. I don't know, Gavin, if you remember, we were wearing those old browny green, nasty, ugliest shirts you ever seen.
Yeah, they were on loan from Florida Rugby, I think.
Yeah. These old cotton heavy shirts. We arrived at Key Biscayne on a Sunday morning where they were doing, it looked like maybe an under 8 or under 10 session. And there was about 15 kids, but there were 6 coaches with 15 kids.
Wow.
Bear in mind, this is 2014. No one was doing anything like that. We all kind of looked at each other and went, oh, that's the trick. It's coaches.
Yep.
And so what we realized was we needed more coaches than we needed. We needed coaches more than we needed players. So we went out, and that's what actually caused us to start the old boys team. Because the old boys team attracted a load of ex-rugby players, and they suddenly remembered that they all loved rugby, and they became the foundation of all the coaches that we have now. So that was a really big part of it for us, was realizing that coaches are really, really important. So yeah, thank you, Key Biscayne, for leading the way on that one.
Yeah, no, full credit to Key Biscayne. They always have a ton of coaches down there. Marcelo, obviously, a little different situation than Okapi, not as much of a football culture, down in Key Biscayne. But what are some of the obstacles that you've sort of had to overcome in your time at Key Biscayne? Obviously, fields being an issue and just general numbers. But how have you guys managed to accomplish overcoming those obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, we had always strong support from the village of Key Biscayne. Had very good relationship. Always, I mean, we had our back and forth during these 13 years. But finding space among other sports is being always an issue. I mean, the village has to manage soccer, has to manage hockey, field hockey, and finding spot for us, it was always an issue, always. Even though we have very strong support from the village. The other issue that we have that probably Okapi doesn't have it is when our kids get to high school, I mean, for some reason, they stop playing. I mean, and we come with teams of 30 or even 40 kids in under 12, under 14, under 16, and then they go to high school and we hardly get to a team sometimes, to 15 guys for a weekend. And Matt and Gavin knows it very well. I mean, some years we couldn't even have one under 19 and another under 17. I mean, we just need to make one high school team only. And I really don't know the reason for that. Coaches have never been a problem, as Matt mentioned. I mean, I said that we are 180 kids, and we have more or less 40 coaches, between 35 and 40 coaches. And that's because, I mean, what we try to do here is to copy what we lived in our clubs, mostly in Argentina. We have also people from Uruguay, Brazil, Venezuela, a lot of French guys that lives in Pancras or Coral Gables joined us the last 5 or 7 years. So we have some French coaches as well, but all of them find the same. I mean, we are having fun here and teaching our kids the values of this sport. And that's what we believe this sport is for in youth rugby. Then when you get to high school or even to men, you get to compete. But in the youth division, it's having fun. And the first things we can do is having fun, the coaches, ourselves. So, but going back to your question, I mean, finding a spot to play, finding a place where you have a club. I mean, we want to copy our clubs from Argentina, and it's not just being a member, it's going to the club. There is a room, a place, a bar, your changing rooms, I mean, with pictures of your former players. And that's what we try to copy, and we can't because we need to use Key Biscayne, I mean, the city facilities. So, but basically that's it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the field issues, you're not blessed with a ton of fields in Key Biscayne, and you kind of have to find what you have. And around Florida, I don't think anybody except perhaps Sarasota, have an actual clubhouse to be able to use. Those of us that have come from a true rugby culture background are used to having a place to change and a place to just hang out at the field. And I think Miami and Key Biscayne have done a great job, though, and Okapi as well have done a great job of providing that social atmosphere at the fields as well as we can. I think when it comes down to the high school rugby, the girls is the answer, right? That's the only answer I can think of, that guys don't want to play rugby anymore, is they lose. Listen, I'm a high school golf coach, and I was always, it's my 6th year this year, and I always wanted seniors on my team. And then I realized when they get to be seniors, they've got their SAT under their belt and their grades are okay, and then their attention turns to girls, unfortunately.
Yeah,
one of the obstacles as well. Now, Matt and Gavin, you mentioned coming from West Pines, which is obviously a team that no longer exists, and Weston, a team that sort of merged, shall we say, to sort of create Okapi. What do you think? You've obviously been in contact with all the other clubs around the state, with those clubs that have come and gone. Why do these clubs fail? And what have you guys done differently, you think, that has led to the long-term success of Okapi?
For me, I think a lot of that is having to let go a little bit of the control. So, and Matt will remember me and him had a conversation regarding Mariano. Who obviously, Mariano is, if something's going to happen, it goes through him, and he really does do a very good job and make sure everything sort of happens. And there was a period of time, I can't remember exactly when, but I remember thinking they're doing everything and they need to let go a little bit. And I've done the same thing. Like, you want to coach every team. You want to be, in control of everything, and you just have to let go of certain things. If you've got people that will volunteer their time, and you've got friends and family that are involved in the club, and trusting that they're going to get the job done. They may not do it the same as you. They may not do it as well as you sometimes, but they'll do it because they like it, they love it, their kids are involved, and it's all good. And I think that for us, in my opinion at least, that's one of the big things that helped it go. Now I don't know how many coaches we've got, maybe 25 coaches, and then there's a parent for each age group. There's like a manager, and that last year we did that. We sort of spread it out amongst a bunch of other people. There's that group of people that have bought into it, and they're the ones now running the rugby club. We do the political stuff with the city, and we make sure it gets done, and make sure that the money's there that's needed for these barbecues that we do, for example, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of trusting that those people will do the job, and they buy into it, and because they've bought into it mentally, it's all about their kid and their family, and now they're doing that job, and they do an amazing job, and they're invested in the whole situation from top to bottom. Lining the fields, or making sure a phone call gets done, so we reserve the pitches and all of that stuff. We just slowly but surely pushed it onto those folks that are willing to do a little bit of work. We were doing, I'll be honest, we were probably doing 25, 30 hours a week working for the rugby club for free.
Right.
And it's still like that a bit sometimes. But now, if everybody just does a couple of hours a week in terms of getting that stuff put together, and you're in a better position that way. You can breathe. There is days now, in the last season where maybe my age group that I was coaching wasn't playing, and all of a sudden I found myself just sitting and watching a game, and watching my 15-year-old or my 13-year-old playing. That hadn't happened for a couple of years. This year we managed to get that. So and that's continuing a little bit, and slowly again letting go of other areas of the town. It doesn't help that Matt just buggers off around the other side of the planet, by the way. That wasn't particularly helpful. But we got people. We replaced him.
I had to test the success of the structure that we put in place. I think one of the big things that leads to, and Marcelo mentioned it, one of the things that leads to other clubs not succeeding is this top-down mentality.
Yes.
This year we're going to build a high school team, and they're all studs, and they're going to win a championship, and it's going to be amazing, with no thought to what happens next year. We did the same as Marcelo was talking about. We wanted to build a rugby club. We didn't want to build a rugby team. We wanted a club. And so our focus was always feed the youngest age group as much as we can, knowing that at 17, and by the way, the whole thing when they hit 17, it's a worldwide thing. If you see the RFU numbers over here in England, the percentages in England are even worse for the fall off from rugby from 16
Oh, wow.
to 17. It's unbelievable. You'll see 40 kids in the U16 team, and you'll see 15 the following year as U17s. So our focus was always making sure that we built the lowest tier of the club, and we built that up. And I think you see it in men's clubs. I mean, there's a lot of clubs around that call themselves clubs. They're not clubs. They're a men's team, and they have to rebuild the team every year. What we wanted to do was start at under 6 or under 7, and then one day have that under 7 player play for our men's first team. That was always the goal, and we've always gauged our success by whether we've got former youth players coming through and playing men's. And last year we had 3 come through and play. As we move forward, we're going to get more and more and more. So that for us is a real benchmark for success.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Okapi, I remember the men's senior team started, I think, at D3 and then jumped to D2 perhaps only after one season, and everybody was sort of like, oh, that's a little bit of a jump. But, no matter how much you guys may, obviously not competed for a D2 title the last few years, Okapi is where people's eyes need to be, and that this is the way a club should run, and that it's just a matter of time that you guys are producing players, obviously, hopefully if they stick around in South Florida, which I was going to get to MLR stuff down the road here, which I think will help, in that, Okapi is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the next sort of 3 to 5 years, I would think, because these kids will be coming to the senior level having played rugby for, 7, 8 years, rather than, I picked it up in college and I've played for 2 or 3 years. It's going to be a massive difference. Now, Marcelo, talk about Key Biscayne, some of the obstacles that you may have dealt with, over the years, being a much smaller community, and I'm not going to say smaller athletes in general. You always seem to have the numbers, but it's such a smaller community. You're drawing from a much smaller area than the Western is, perhaps.
Yes, I guess that starting with the high school in Weston they have like 5,000 kids in high school, more or less. The high school where the Key Biscayneers go, I mean, they have 1,200. So it's a big difference for recruiting. Having said that, I mean, we never had issues recruiting for the youngest divisions, under 6, under 8, under 10.
Right.
We have a lot of players, and we compete with soccer. Soccer is a big sport and very seductive for many of the kids, and they are much bigger organization. They are much well organized in terms of tournaments, so they are kind of a nice competition to have. But then I said, I mean, getting to high school and keeping all the players playing and having good and strong high school teams, I believe. I mean, we believe that that's an image for the other kids, no, from the younger kids. I mean, and they see their brothers and their friends playing in the upper division, and hopefully someday in the men's division. That's what we had in Argentina. I mean, you play, you get to the men's team, and all your kids and nephews and friends were watching you on a Saturday afternoon. That would be a dream. But struggling, I mean, issues is basically that, the recruiting and having a complete high school team, and having the club and manage the space field to play.
Yeah, now obviously without Key Biscayne having a senior men's team, I think Key Biscayne's been around long enough now to see kids graduate high school and go on. How has that been hard to see the kids leave? Obviously, Okapi, you want to see them go play college rugby, but then you want to see them end up, perhaps coming back to South Florida. How has that been? How has that been dealt with by the Key Biscayne club?
We tried a couple of years, I remember, but I don't know. It's kind of a difficult situation. I mean, because when you are struggling with a school team, and then the kid goes somewhere else for college, I mean, they should need to come back and to town and play here. So I have in mind now. we will not reject the opportunity if we have it. But we are focused on youth rugby now.
For sure, yeah. I know the likes of Angus. I remember who was a great player for Key Biscayne, and then I know a lot of the Key Biscayne, the Argentinian players end up going back to Argentina and playing a high level rugby there as well. Now, Matt, let's go to Okapi, back to Okapi. Gavin and Matt, obviously compared to Key Biscayne, a massive club. Has the size of the club been more of a blessing or a pain to you guys? You've become so big so quickly. You're trying to develop, as I mentioned with Marcelo, you're trying to develop those kids to perhaps come and play for Okapi senior team, but obviously with the way the collegiate scene is blowing up now, you want to see them go play college rugby for 4 years and then maybe after that come back to Okapi. But talk about the size of the club and how that, you mentioned obviously having enough coaches is one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's one of the biggest problems that a lot of the smaller clubs around Florida have had. But has the size of the club been a blessing or a pain for you guys?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to that one is yes. Yes, it has been. No, I mean, it brings with it its own problems. I mean, whatever size the club, if we were struggling for numbers, then we'd be talking about that problem. So of course, every situation brings its own problems. But it's the thing that's allowed us to succeed as well as we have. And again, that comes down to that club structure that we built from the bottom up. The reason why West Pines didn't make it, the reason why Western, the Western club folded a few years before we formed Okapi, was because they weren't looking at building a structure that was gonna last. So for us, it was never a problem. It was never an insurmountable problem having it be as big as it is, as quickly as it is. It just took as Gavin was saying, it took a tremendous amount. It's taken a tremendous amount of management and continues to take a tremendous amount of management just to make sure all the moving parts are talking to each other.
Yeah, Gavin, you're obviously still here, and as I mentioned to Marcelo, it's you want to see those kids go on to the collegiate success, but you also want to see them perhaps come back and help Okapi, eventually on the senior side of things. You're a little torn, especially as your position of, your main job is finding kids, college scholarships. Do you get a little torn by that?
To a certain extent, but I'm very much of the opinion of just keep an eye on the big picture. And Matt's heard me say that a bunch of times probably over the years. It doesn't matter because I like people say, oh well, the men's team haven't won a state championship, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like we'll eventually win something because we're making progress. Our objective is develop rugby. Let's just develop rugby, and to do that, you do it with the youth. And by nature, it doesn't matter to me. I know that in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whenever it is, whether it's around the corner or it's a little bit further away, we're going to be doing well. We will lose kids. We lose kids all the time. For example, a success story is Matt's son Gabe. He got a full scholarship to a high school in the UK. In my head, as the under-19s coach for this coming year or last year even, I'm like, okay, great. I've got Gabe. I can play him at prop and 8. And then he tells me, oh, he's got a high school scholarship to go to the UK. Am I going to be upset about that? Absolutely not. Great, go. Because then I know that if he ever moves back here, the first thing I think of, if he gets a job over here because he has a friend that helps him, and he comes back, he's going to end up playing for us. And and that's similar in. There's a kid that played for St. Thomas when they were a thing at high school level. They've kind of dropped off, but we helped him. He trained with us in the off season, but played with St. Thomas during the season because it's nearby to us. And he went off to Arkansas State. He was a client of mine. He messaged me about 2 weeks ago. Said, "Hey, I'm coming back from Arkansas. Can I run with the men's team?" He didn't even play for us. He played for a team nearby. But the first person that he messaged was me. Personal text, Gavin, can I come to your club? Are you guys training? Nope, but as soon as they are, I'll let you know. And
And
Yeah.
my boy wants to pursue the game professionally. So he's over here for that reason. But the one thing we always talk about is how much he's looking forward to having a season with Okapi men's. That's what he talked about. That's the focus for him.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Tucci was a great example. We obviously talked to him in our second episode as a guy that grew up playing in Western, went off to college to play football, but kept rugby in the back of his mind. Came and played for Okapi for a season, and then now ends up playing professionally in the MLR. Matt, talk about Gabe and just what his sort of story and how you ended up back in England, and how you'd love to see him progress in the game. What impact he had on you moving back there?
I mean, it was the factor and catalyst that made it all happen. Gav and I were messaged. We get text messages and emails from people all the time, but we got an email each from a couple of English or an English coach from a private school over here saying we want to build relationships with clubs and so on. We'd like to meet up, and it just so happened that we had a Florida Jaguares training, which is the Florida representative team, that day. So I messaged these guys and said, listen, if you want, come and have a look at this and see what you think. They came by. The guy's name was Anthony. Done some really good high-level coaching. The school is in Ipswich. He ran part of the session. He was a really, really good guy, and sat down at dinner with me and Gavin that night. And literally, the first thing he said to me was, "We want your boy." And we looked into what it would take. The US and the English school systems don't really mesh very well.
No, I know all about that.
Yeah. We looked into what it would take and realized that if it was going to happen, it had to happen now, or he graduated high school. And that was June. By September, my wife and his little sister were on a plane to the UK. I stayed behind and kind of finished things up. And this is something I learned from Gavin. One thing that I did would probably make the biggest difference was I made a highlight reel of every game for Okapi and for Jaguares. I learned some editing skills from Charlie. Put this tape together and literally just shopped it around. We had interest from Gloucester Academy, we had interest from Saracens Academy, Northampton Academy wanted to have a chat with him, and a few schools. He went off to a Saracens training, and one of the heads of rugby of one of the biggest schools in the area. This school's literally been around for 1,200 years. Offered him a scholarship. Then we went chatting to one of the local private schools here, St. Lawrence College, which is a really good rugby school. And I sent them his highlight reel, which was only about 4 or 5 minutes long. And this was a Friday evening English time. I sent it from Florida. I had their head of PE on the phone to me immediately saying, what can I do? What can I do to get this kid? And it's been a great progression for him. He got in a bit late in the year to really have Saracens look at it properly, so we'll reset that for next year. But the benefit for him is that he played rugby literally for 7 years. How many 15-year-old American kids played rugby for 7 years?
No, not many at all.
And so he's fitted into that quite well. His aim in life is he wants to become a professional rugby player, and then later on be an osteopath or chiropractor. So I guess to fix all the bones that he's going to break playing rugby. He's almost 6'2" and weighs about 230. I'm scared of him. He knows what he's doing.
That's the one thing about this sport too, that you can talk to these, quote, football players in America, is that they don't play American football anywhere else professionally, anywhere else around the world. But if you continue on the rugby pathway, I mean, we talked to Cam Dolan in our first episode, who went to school in England for a semester, basically, a fall, so basically, and that opened his eyes to what this sport could provide him. Yeah, and I think the representative side of things in Florida, one thing we mentioned in one of our previous episodes was that this COVID-19 pandemic sort of pause will, I think, get especially Florida rugby really back focused on where can we get these athletes the most exposure? And I think the representative side of things, Florida Jaguars, got off to a great start. I think we've had the juice before that, etc. We've seen the success, especially in the U14, G15 side of things, that Florida has had when they've left the state. And it really opens these eyes, especially to these parents that say, why is my kid playing rugby as opposed to football? And this is the answer, is that they can go around the world and play, wherever they want to be. Marcelo, talk about, obviously being part of the Florida Rugby Union and the Florida Youth Rugby Union over the last 11 years, you said, since starting in 2009. Where do you think the union can get things a little better on the youth side of things, and perhaps get more eyes on these kids that are playing high level rugby that may not otherwise be seen?
I would say that for us, the main thing that the Florida Youth Rugby Union can help us and the rest of the clubs in Florida to grow is focus on the youngest kids. I mean, focus on sometimes we need to play with the under 6, under 8, under 10 kids, and we just have the guys from Okapi to play. I mean, few clubs like Wellington, probably Boca Raton, but other than that, I mean, they only have the high school teams. And I believe that for rugby, for the rugby in the US, it will be great if probably you will not get the club as we know it in England or in Argentina, but you can get kids that know each other from 6 years old, and they play every week in a festival, or even each other week in a festival, and they meet with other clubs, and that's the way. So when you get to high school or to men's division, you have a huge amount of players that they can go anywhere. I mean, they can go to MLR, to playing in the men's team in college, or in men's team in another state. So, but they know the rugby from the rules. As Gaby mentioned at the beginning, I mean, they didn't learn the sport when they were 16 or 18. They played it from 6 years old, 8 years old. And I think that the union has been working. I mean, has been very supportive with a club like us or Okapi that wanted to do something with the youth division. They have indeed, but probably having more focus there, it will help us more.
Yeah, and obviously Florida, South Florida, especially being a very transitive area where people move into for 2 or 3 years and then move out of. Has that been an issue for Key Biscayne, players coming and going, or has there been a pretty consistent base of players with you guys? You hear me, Marcelo? You got me?
Yeah, sorry, you were cut off.
No, I was saying, do you see, with South Florida being a very transitive area where people come for a year or two and then disappear, transfer to somewhere else, has that been a problem with Key Biscayne over the years?
No, I mean, we always had. I mean, we never had a year with lower players, less players than the year before. We always grew. Yes, we had a lot of people going back and forth, but we always have enough players. That's not been an issue. I mean, in fact, you keep almost above 80% of your players. And even if they return to Florida for some reason, they came back to the club. And if they come back with their after college, they come to the club and help coaching. So that hasn't been an issue for us.
Gotcha. Now, Matt and Gavin, I'm sure you have strong opinions on how the union can help build youth rugby in the state of Florida. What are your feelings on that regards of how they can help, especially now we've had this break to really think about things and refocus perhaps on the representative side of things, with perhaps now, especially on the senior side of things, no perhaps national championship or anything like that.
Yeah, I've got a couple of points on that. I mean, we've got the opportunity to obviously, put in new ideas and do different things. But quite often what gets regurgitated is stuff that's been tried before, and it's sort of the same repetitive thing. You try the same things over and over again, and nothing really improves. But I mean, if anything that I've learned personally from watching Okapi grow, it seems to be the best things that seem to help us grow are the experiences. So, you can throw money at things. You can knock on the door of every high school in your neighborhood. You can do whatever you want to do. But the reason why something grows, from what I've seen it does at least, is creating fun experiences, whether that is traveling as a club somewhere on a tour, or I think our barbecues are an absolute showstopper. Like for us, doing the barbecue twice a year for the club, we invite, if there's 200 kids in the rugby club, and if every kid showed up and brought one parent, there's 400 people at a barbecue. That's a hell of a barbecue, and that's not the case. There's 600, 700, 800 people potentially turning up at, you have the kid that plays, you have the little sibling, and the mom and the dad, or if it's an older kid, maybe it's the girlfriend or the best buddy that doesn't play but hangs out at the games. Just the potential of that experience. And Charlie knows. Charlie goes and often films those barbecues for us, and we use it as a. And I've had parents come to me saying, "Oh, I saw your video on YouTube or wherever it is. They saw it on Facebook or whatever." And I was like, then they realized that it was in their neighborhood, and they were like, so they showed up the next year. I saw a video of your barbecue. Nothing to do with the rugby. There's hardly a rugby ball in the video. It was just that's me and my kids sitting there, goofing around under a tree, having something to eat. That's the experience that grows the youth part of the game, because that parent looks at that and says, that's an environment I want to spend time with my kids on a Saturday afternoon, instead of sitting at home watching a movie or maybe sitting in their backyard. They can do something social. It's safe. It's healthy. That's a massive part of it for me, at least. That's the question, but yeah, that's where I go. That's what makes it happen for me.
Go on, Matt. You have something to say.
I think in terms of what the union can do, I think the path is gone pretty well. When we look at, and Gavin is absolutely right, Ross, Marcelo, we're all singing from the same song sheet. We're all saying the experiences we've had in rugby and what it's done for us. You look at a Tommy Gallo, one of the first high school players from Okapi. Was certainly our first player to go overseas. Has been over in England studying for a couple of years in Richmond. And you've got Marcus Young from Key Biscayne. Both Tommy and Marcus are going to be trying out for Atlanta in August this year.
Awesome.
They played Juice together, and for a couple of years in there, the representative stuff kind of went a bit weird. USA Rugby came up with this participation model, which is just clearly didn't work. And so a little group of us put the Jaguares in place to try and create the experience that Gavin's talking about, but also being that representative field where they're really getting a step up in their rugby as they move forward. And I think the biggest thing that the union can do is support that representative model. And in this case, it's the Jaguares, having just made an agreement with Atlanta to be the official pathway for Florida kids to Atlanta rugby. And that rugby has to be aspirational. There has to be something for a kid to shoot for, to say, well, I want to get to that, and they have to see a pathway. And so the supporting of that representative rugby at a higher level, I think, is so important across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously refereed, around the country, like Sacramento, big youth tournament out there in Las Vegas, and seeing these academies, out of Utah and out of California, it's something we really need to strive for. I know, Marcelo, you guys have been down to Freeport in the Bahamas and the youth festival down there. Talk about that experience and how that's grown as a club, your club as Key Biscayne.
I was going to mention that Gavin mentioned the tours that you can make you can do with your teams, and we started in 2011 going to Cayman, and then we went to Freeport almost all years, but one or two that went to Greenwich, and we go with the whole club. I mean, probably under 6 just remains Key Biscayne, but under 8 and up, we went to Freeport every year. We went to Cayman once, Greenwich twice, and it was an awesome experience. put all the kids in the ferry. We get to Freeport, wonderful, wonderful environment. People from Bermuda, from Cayman, and the kids have a great time among them, with their parents, with their coaches. In Freeport, what they do on weekends, I mean on Sunday, when they, as a closing of the tournament, they play Babas, Barbarians. I mean, and it's great for the kids. I mean, they put the other shirt of the other team, they keep their socks and play each other, and it's been great. It's been great. This year, our high school division participated from a tournament in North Carolina. It was a great weekend for the kids and the coaches. Almost no parents in that tour, so just the kids.
Right.
It was great. I mean, and I think that we need to promote that. I mean, it was very traditional in Argentina. I guess that in England as well. If you can go to the same state, you go to the same state. If you can move to another, or if you can go overseas, it depends on the opportunity and the resources that you have. But for the kids, it's great. It's part of the culture and the fun that they have, and they will keep it forever. And if you give that the kid to when they have 8 years old, they will love it for the whole life, and they will love rugby for that.
That's the thing. I mean, you're trying to get that kid, South Florida kid, to say rugby is where I want to spend my life playing the athletic sport. I mean, I still remember my youth tours being in England, and going to Southwest England and going to Belgium. I'm 43 now. I still remember those tours, and I'll remember them for the rest of my life. And that's an awesome thing. I know Matt, you mentioned MLR. I know Atlanta clearly sort of reaching their claws down here to Florida and understanding that the amount of talent down here. Obviously, next year, not next year, excuse me, 2022. The talk of Miami getting an MLR program. What would that really mean to South Florida and the pathway for these kids?
I think it would be huge, wouldn't it? We've got. I mean, I don't know what there is in the water in Florida, but we breed some athletes. We really do breed some athletes, and the standard of coaching is really, really coming along. With all the clubs, not just us and Biscayne, the Wellington, Boca, Sarasota, Tampa, all really, really caring and really investing in their youth programs. I think to have Atlanta there and have Atlanta be so willing, as I said, that the Florida Jaguares being a pathway team for Atlanta, or the pathway team for the state of Florida for Atlanta, it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal for Atlanta because it gives them some security that they can build their recruiting base in the future. But it's also a really big deal for Florida kids because it gives them a really great target. And then a couple of years from now, with that talk of Miami having its own MLR team, which of course, with the amount of talent that we do have, makes so much sense. And the ability to attract overseas players, looking at Chris Robshaw from Harlequins in England, having just signed with San Diego. We all know that Chris Robshaw signed with San Diego because he wants to live in San Diego. I'm willing to bet that Danny Kerr in a couple of years or someone similar is probably going to want to give Miami a shot. And what that's going to do for our local players, again, academy pathways and creating relationships, putting our kids around these top quality players, it's only going to make our kids better, strengthen, and then, and this is my favorite part, when you put kids on a pathway, you send that kid changed back to their club, and suddenly they become a different kind of leader, and you get that peer-to-peer training, which is always the best kind of coaching you can get. I think the next couple of years for Florida is looking really good as long as we stay on this right path.
Yeah, Gavin, obviously we mentioned a little previously your main job is, offering opportunities to rugby players to play college rugby and professional rugby in the USA. We obviously saw two Florida products get drafted. We only had 16 picks, 24 picks or so go in the recent MLR draft, and two of them were from Florida. Obviously one from Western in Powers, and then another one from Daytona. Talk about what this getting an MLR team here will mean, just for Florida rugby in general and as a rugby destination.
Yeah, there's a lot of different angles I can go with that, because obviously it's massive if a team comes here. Is there enough support in the area to do that? Maybe not. You know, if you physically look at the numbers, there might not be enough physical rugby fans that would just show up, right? But I don't think, and I think this is a very, very specific point, I don't think that MLR as an organization are too worried about that. I think MLR are not focusing on rugby fans. I think they're focusing on sports fans that are happy to convert, just like the UFC. UFC wasn't a big thing. Like people, maybe I boxed when I was a kid. You know, maybe you were a wrestler when you were a kid, and after that, I didn't really get into it. But I watched UFC, and I'm not a big fight fan. You know, that they've grown that sport not off the back of fighters that watch the game. That they've grown that sport because it's entertaining. And then the people that are turning up in the future, people that are turning up at the stadiums are going to be just sports fans. You know, we have to create that atmosphere. So then, in that sense, I'm not too worried if a team comes to Miami and not the whole rugby community turns up and there's only 1,000 people. That's the reality, right? That's a big crowd for us. State finals or whatever. You know, so I'm more concerned with the can we convert the sports fan and get them into a stadium, and they've come and they've looked at Okapi and they spoke to all the different coaches in the different areas, and you know, they're kind of weighing up their options on where a field might be, or you know what city what city can let them in the door, right, and which city is willing. That's what it's going to boil down to. But there's a lot going on. I hear conversations back and forth, people calling me, asking me this, that, and the other. The fact that it's gradually grown, although it's fast, I've been really interested in seeing how it all develops, because the group that's interested in doing that, and then obviously now Atlanta wanting to come down here and sort of pick up a few kids and sort of spread their wings a bit. That's great up until when the Miami team opens up. Then I'm sure that this area gets locked down in terms of the talent. But yeah, for me, it all boils down. Like I had a player from a very light, I can't name names, but an important rugby club in Europe came over, wants to try out to play American football. Came over and introduced him to some people, and there was a tryout for the Cleveland Browns on the next field to where I was doing my summer camp that I do. And in there was about 60 guys trying out for like the 63rd spot or whatever it is to get into the Cleveland Browns squad. You know, I guess their coach does that every year. He just leaves that last, is it 63 or 52, whatever it is.
53,
the last roster spot is always available, and the coach comes to South Florida, does a tryout of guys that basically didn't get anywhere after college, and I was salivating. I was like, oh my God. There was 50, 60 guys sitting there, and every single one of them was probably as good as any rugby player in Florida in terms of physical ability. And none of them had a clue what rugby was. And I was walking around doing the whole agent thing and giving out cards and smiling and all that. And it was horrible. It was a very stressful situation for me, because I was just like, I got to get off and play rugby. So in that conversation with a couple of the guys, it was like, oh, rugby? No, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. I'm like, you're sitting here about to try out for a Cleveland Browns. And he goes, yeah, but, you know, I've got my job. I'm like, well, you know, what's your job? And he's like, oh, I work in a warehouse. He didn't make it to the NFL, so the guys are working in a warehouse or in McDonald's. And I'm just like, oh, why don't you just play rugby? Just play rugby. The story be over. It makes me a little bit crazy, to be honest. So that experience for me just that blew my mind, and it scares me that these guys are not playing the game, and just because they're not educated, they don't know about it. But imagine if you get just 10% of those guys, you know, and then you can build. You plug in a Danny Kerr, like he mentioned, and you know, a couple of foreign guys that know what they're doing. Plug those guys in at scrum half, tight head, prop, fullback, and fly half, and you just got a bunch of monsters running around. It might not be perfect rugby from a purist perspective, but the Americans will love it, and they're the ones that are going to buy the tickets to sit down and watch in the stadium and watch the game. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about having Perry Baker at some point on our podcast, and he's one of those perfect examples of that. if there wasn't a Brian Richardson, who I also hope to have on the podcast down the road, to tell him this is what rugby is. And you three guys but played a massive part in letting those Florida kids know what rugby is and bringing them on board and saying these are where the opportunities are. If you're not that point, as you mentioned, Gavin, that 0.1% that perhaps might play pro rugby, these are the opportunities pro football, excuse me. These are the opportunities outside of football. This is what rugby is, and this is what it can bring to you as a culture and as a potential opportunity outside of professional, of the NFL. Well, gentlemen, listen, we're getting close to, I think, 9 o'clock. Matt, I don't even know what time it is there. It's getting close to 2 a.m. there. It's time for you to go to bed.
I don't even know what day it is, mate.
Well, I don't think anybody knows at the moment what day it is with this pandemic going on right now. But Diku, I appreciate you spending your time with us from Key Biscayne. Charlie, obviously also awesome work behind the scenes with the videos. I love the barbecue videos. I think made me just sort of salivate for after I referee a game and can come to the sideline and get an awesome steak sandwich for myself after I referee. Gavin, Matt, I appreciate you spending the time with us. And listen, I think the future of Florida rugby at the youth level is bright, and you guys have played a big part, in ensuring that is the case. And I appreciate you spending the time with us this evening here on Talking Florida Rugby Occasionally. Next week is July 4th weekend. We will have an episode on July 5th. We're working on getting a USA Eagle. I won't divulge the details of that particular individual, but it won't be Perry Baker. We'll have him on down the road for sure, but we hope to have a USA Eagle on with us next weekend to celebrate July 4th. And again, gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us this evening on Talking Florida Rugby. Appreciate everybody watching and checking in afterwards on podcasts or on the replay on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll hope to see you next weekend, Sunday, July 5th, 7:30. Charlie, appreciate your help behind the scenes, and hope to see you guys next week. And again, thanks everybody for checking us out. And if you want to help sponsor our program here, check out Charlie's information on Facebook, and you'll be able to help us out once again. My name is Ross Davenport. Again, that Ross bloke, Charlie at Rugby FL, the best regional rugby site in the entire United States, and wish you a good night. Charlie, any words before we leave?
Thank you, guys. It's been very interesting listening to you.
Cheers, boys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.